This is The Space Shot, episode 357 for May 6th, 2018. Mars Insight is go for launch. I'm John Molnix. The Mars Insight mission launched yesterday morning, far earlier than I could wake up for, unfortunately, from Vandenberg Air Force Base. This is the first time an interplanetary mission launched from the West Coast, and had today's launch not been successful, the launch period for getting to Mars did extend through June 8th. Thankfully, the launch happened on Saturday, sending the spacecraft to the Red Planet with a landing date of November 26, 2018. InSight will touch down at Elysium Planitia, and once on the surface, the lander is expected to operate for a little over 1 Martian year, which is about 2 Earth years. InSight wasn't the only spacecraft to hitch a ride to Mars early Saturday morning. The Mars Cube 1, or MARCO, are a pair of briefcase-sized CubeSats that will also make the trek to Mars. These CubeSats are a bit larger than the 10-centimeter square design that's the base unit for this class of spacecraft. MARCO is a 6-unit design that measures approximately 36 centimeters by 24 by 11. That works out to be about 14.5 inches by 9.5 inches by about 4.5 inches. These tiny spacecraft are designed to communicate with Earth, a remarkable feat considering their diminutive size. I hope this technology demonstration goes well for these little CubeSats. NASA is hoping the flyby demonstration is successful, because if MARCO is operating when InSight arrives at Mars, these CubeSats will be able to relay information about the landing of InSight. The primary goals of the InSight mission are to, quote, 1. Understand the formation and evolution of terrestrial planets through the investigation of interior structure and processes of Mars, and 2. Determine the present levels of tectonic activity and meteorite impact activity on Mars. Other objectives include studying the crust, mantle, core, and interior of the red planet. Keep your fingers crossed for this mission, because the Red Planet is notorious for ending missions. According to NASA, about 40% of all of the missions sent to Mars by all space agencies are successful. It's noted that the planet's thin atmosphere makes landing a challenge, and, quote, its extreme temperature swings make it difficult to operate on the surface. But if the spacecraft survives the trip, there's a bounty of science to be collected. By this point, you may be asking yourself what InSight stands for. This is a government operation after all, and names are always an acronym for something. Mars Insight stands for Interior Exploration Using Seismic Investigations, Geodesy, and Heat Transport. Let's just stick with InSight. This mission is important because it's the first time we're going to be studying the internal composition of Mars, from its deep interior to Marsquakes. The insights, pun intended, from this mission will teach us about planets like Earth and Mars, the processes that formed these terrestrial worlds, and how these planets have evolved over billions of years since their formations. The mission will be one with a lot of firsts, from the first mission that places a seismometer directly on the Martian surface, to using a self-hammering mole that burrows deep into the Martian surface. I can't just mention a self-hammering mole without explaining how this particular instrument functions. The mole is part of the HP Cubed instrument. HP Cube stands for Heat Flow and Physical Properties Probe. InSight's robotic arm will move the instrument onto the Martian surface, where a self-hammering mole will burrow into the surface. If you've listened to the podcast for long enough, you may have heard me talk about one of my previous careers. Once upon a time, I was a bench jeweler. I set stones, sized rings, and helped create jewelry. One of the tools I use to set stones sounds like it operates on a similar concept to this self-hammering mole. The mole will use, quote, thousands of hammering strokes of a spring-loaded tungsten block over the course of about 30 days to reach its full depth. The tungsten block and thousands of hammer strokes over a period of about a month is far slower than the tool I used, but it does sound similar. This mole is expected to reach a depth of 10 to 16 feet over this month period. It's also expected to reach 15 times deeper beneath the Martian surface than other attempts by previous landers. The mole has science instrumentation that is relayed up through a tether back to the InSight lander. This instrument is crucial to our understanding of Mars because it examines heat flow. NASA notes that heat flow is a vital sign for the planet. Quote, it carries information about the interior heat engine that drives the planet's geology. Heat is the energy that powers planetary evolution, shaping the mountains and canyons of the surface. A planet's interior heat affects how primordial ingredients of planetary formation form layers and how volatile components, such as water molecules, are released to the surface or atmosphere. Determining modern temperature flux will help scientists discriminate between models for how the interior of Mars has evolved over time. Heat flow also foretells the destiny of a planet, the pace at which its core energy is diminishing. The amount of new science data that will be gathered by InSight is going to keep NASA and international partners here on Earth busy for some time. Here's to a successful cruise phase of the mission and to a happy landing. Tomorrow, the first flight of Endeavour. Finally. I hope all of you have a fantastic rest of your day. I appreciate each and every one of you that listen to the podcast every day. I'd be incredibly grateful if you could share the podcast with your friends and family. Tag one of them and let them know about your favorite episode. I'd also really appreciate it if you could venture into the Apple Podcasts app or your podcast app of choice and leave a review for The Space Shot. A steady stream of reviews helps ensure The Space Shot is more visible in the Apple Podcasts app. As always, the show notes have more information on today's episode. You can hit me up on Instagram and Twitter. Find me at John Molnix. I'm always up to chat. You can also connect with me on Facebook. Just search The Space Shot or check out the links in the show notes and you'll find me. I'm John Molnix, and I'll catch you on the flip side.